How's it going, folks? Here with some more Generation 9 competitive discussion. This time, the stuff up for debate is not problematic Pokemon in the metagame, but actually a problematic mechanic. The core mechanic of the whole game, Terastallization, is being discussed. Which is, it's a whole thing, isn't it? It's interesting. So, we've all probably been playing games, having fun with the new mechanic, becoming crazy new types on all our Pokemon. And it's fun, it's interesting, it creates counterplay that wasn't there before. It's creating dynamic situations we've never seen in a competitive Pokemon. And I gotta say it's a far better mechanic than Dynamax. Dynamax was just way too powerful. There was no real way to restrict that realistically. But this time, one of the options here is to outright ban Terastallize. Of course this is an option, but most people seem to want to keep Terastallize in the game in some form. And the reason it's being discussed in the first place is because I think that the mechanic creates too many varying situations that are hard to account for, you know? In competitive Pokemon, there's got to be some kind of sense of order and structure and stuff like that. And the ability for any Pokemon to change into any type at once and gain new coverage is like really expands the amount of stuff you can actually account for in team building and in play. And even though you may be able to know that, like, okay, Annihilape is commonly running Terra Water at the moment. Alright. That's all well and good, but then it's still a bit of a guessing game when they're going to Terra Water and when they aren't. If they're going to spend that resource on their Primeape or somewhere else. And I guess that's a form of, like, mind games, a bit of, like, layers of decision making, but also when you're in those situations, it really feels like a guessing game. It feels like you have a lack of control and a lack of, like, ability to account for these things, at least in my experience. So some of the proposed options we have are restricting Terastallization in some way, and here are some proposed restrictions. Showing the Terra type of each Pokemon in the player's party. So the Terra type they have on their Pokemon is no longer a surprise. You can see that, for example, Dragonite has Terra Normal for E-Speed, or like some random specific Terra type like Electric is no longer a surprise as it would be previously. Gives you a little bit more ability to counter that Terra type. Maybe predict when they're going to use it. I don't love this option. I think that it kind of somehow it just feels a bit lame, and I think there would still be the same guessing games of when they're going to Terra type. I think that most of the time we know what Terra type they have at this point. Of course, like the options are literally infinite, but sometimes the issue is not the Terra type they have, but the ability for them as some OP defensive Pokemon to become a type that is extremely hard to break through, like strong defensive types like Water, Steel, and Fairy. You know, some Pokemon with a bad typing can now just become an amazing typing out of nowhere. And that's really hard to deal with sometimes. I think that's the biggest problem with the mechanic, is the ability for Pokemon to cheat their own typing. And I know it's a one-time use resource, but sometimes their one-time use resource doesn't balance out your one-time use resource. If them becoming a certain type walls your entire team, they don't have like the perfect Terra type to counter your exact Terra type all the time, you know? There's so many types in the game. I think it creates too much variance in that way. Anyway, the other option, limiting the amount of Pokemon on any given team that have access to Terra. So that would mean that it's kind of hard to explain, but basically it's similar to Z moves, where only one of your Pokemon would be holding a Z move or a Z stone. Most of the time. Technically, you could actually put multiple Z stones on your team back in Gen 7, but no one ever did that because it was a waste of an item on another Pokemon, because you can only Z move once per battle. You can only Z move once per battle, so putting multiple Z stones on your Pokemon is a waste. It would be similar to that, so only one of your Pokemon can Terastallize, and you have to choose that before the battle. That might be alright. I'm not sure. I don't think I love that one either. The other option is limiting Pokemon to only using Terra type that matches their current typings. So for example, a Dragonite would only be able to choose Terra Dragon or Terra Flying. Even though this removes some of the interesting parts of Terra type, like, you know, becoming a whole different type, becoming a Fairy type Dondozo or something, or Steel type Annihilate, whatever. I think this might be the most balanced way to go, because then you can at least see in front of you their possible options. And there's still a little bit of, like, for example, the Dragapult can Terra Dragon to become no longer weak to Ghost. That's still useful. Or it can Terra Ghost to become no longer weak to Ice. There's still a bit of gaming you can do. There's still a guessing game of which of their types do they have as their Terra. Sometimes that's, like, not exactly... like, both options are good, so there's still a guessing game there. And it would remove the issue of the mechanic being too hard to account for. And the wide array of different types different Pokemon can be just being too random. Not random, but too varied. I think that in Pokemon it's important for, like, to be able to sort of predict what some things are going to do, or the options that they have at least. You know, there's always surprise factors. There's, like, the type berries, Truffle Berry and all those, and, like, surprise Scarf, surprise movesets, but usually surprise value in Pokemon requires a bit of commitment, or it requires a bit of creativity. With Terastallize, I think that the issue is that any Pokemon can do it at any time in the battle without, like, a real downside. The only downside is that you've spent the resource and you can't do it again. Which is a little bit of a downside, but sometimes, like, you're in such a good position with your boosted up guy. Now that you've Terra'd, you're kind of, like, solidifying your position, and their ability to Terra doesn't exactly counteract your... like, it doesn't save them from the position they're now in, where they have to deal with this insane threat. Like a Dragonite that has just dodged some important super effective attack by becoming normal type. Now a Dragonite is like +3. What are you going to do? You can't exactly, like, Terra fighting. You would need to have Terra fighting on the team, somehow be able to live their hit. Or the same as with goes with Annihilate, with Espathras becoming more common. And another option is banning the usage of the move Terra Blast. I think that this is a bad one. Terra Blast, I actually do think requires a bit of commitment. It's kind of a waste of a move slot if you don't Terra. Sometimes you can afford that, and it is annoying sometimes when they have a random new coverage option. But... and maybe banning Terra Blast would be positive, but I think that all of the same issues would still exist, and that this would not really... like, I think the Terra Blast is only one of many issues with the mechanic, not, like, the main issue. And with all this said, I do think that it needs more time, and we should let things settle a bit more as well. Like, it's not good to be hasty with banning an entire mechanic or making a decision. And this is only a discussion thread. It's not like we're going to do this next week. And then this is going to involve... I think Finchinator said this is going to involve, like, suspect tests and, like, the usual stuff, because this is a bigger deal. So suspect tests are a most solid way to, like... the whole community basically has to be behind it in when you have a suspect test, because, like, a bunch of people have to qualify for a certain ELO and then vote. So that's a more fair way to go about it in terms of, like, a decision being made. So if you're worried, like, oh, they're going to take away Terastallize. Terastallize is fun. Like, not necessarily. They might keep it. Or they might make some other choice. I don't know. There's time to decide. But we can't deny, folks. I mean, if you've played this metagame a lot, like I have and many others have, it's becoming a little bit of a problem when Pokemon can defy logic with the mechanic and become certain types that are really hard to play around or counter. So this bloke is in favor of outright banning it. And I wouldn't be opposed to this necessarily, but I think we got to think about it. Here's Finch talking about a lot of stuff that can abuse Terra with... Dragonite is a huge one. Dragonite is feeling really annoying right now. Not only because of like boots plus multi-scale, which is a really OP combo. Really makes you miss stealth, like old stealth rock, something like that, to be honest. Even though some people like boots, I don't like boots. But Dragonite being able to be immune to rocks is crazy. And I've been using Dragonite with Terra Normal a lot, and it's really, really strong. It can now no longer be Ice Weak. Like, Terra Normal is pretty crazy alongside multi-scale. Finch is saying here, it lets you get a free setup turn. That's pretty true. Like, it does. And this thing has been carrying me a lot, and when you're in a game where both of you have it, it's really awkward. Like, both of you have the ability to, you know, Terra into a type that is weak to almost nothing, and then it's like, who wins that 1v1? Going off with your Dragonite early feels like a mistake, because then they have a whole Dragonite themselves. But sometimes Dragonite is like your defensive counterplay to something like, I don't know, Iron Moth. For me, like, I have to use my Dragonite if they have Iron Moth, and then, I've used my Dragonite, now their Dragonite is full health, so it's like it reminds me of in Gen 8 Dynamax meta when going off with your Dynamax Gyarados was a mistake, because then they could just go to their Ditto and Dynamax, and now you're screwed, because they just took all your boosts. That's what it feels like with the Dragonite. It's like, if I use my Dragonite before they do, I lose. Which is really kind of stupid. Yeah, obviously Terra Flying Roaring Moon was like the most classic one so far. Terra Fairy Espathra is pretty insane. And Terra Water Annihilate is also running rampant. This thing is... I've started running Thunderbolt on Gholdengo because of this. And it's always a bit awkward because... if I have a Gholdengo in against Annihilate, I don't know if I should Shadow Ball or Thunderbolt. I don't know if they're going to Terra Water straight away to dodge the Shadow Ball, or if they're not going to commit to it straight away. Because it's a commitment, so I'm like... Should I preempt the Terra or not? And I never feel like good about the decision. It never feels like a solid thing. It's always a little bit of a 50-50. Anyway. Read a bit more. Here's ABR from good old-fashioned ADVOU. How's it going, mate? Yeah, he agrees that showing the Terra type isn't going to stop the... Like what I just said about Annihilate, where you know it's probably going to Terra Water. Most of these things are on Terra Water, but just knowing that isn't enough for there to be like these annoying mind games in play that are slightly like iffy and hard to play, it's hard to know what to do. And he says he likes this one where only one Pokemon on the team will have access to Terra. Limiting Pokemon only using a Terra type that matches their stab. A lot of people like this one, the third option. And I think that would be balanced, but it's a bit weird because all it basically does is give offensive Pokemon a big nuke. So this kind of is just like a buff to specifically strong neutral types like Ghost, Dragon, Water, stuff like that, rather than, you know, the whole point of the mechanic, which is to like change types, gain coverage. Even though that might be an unhealthy idea, it's a bit of a like halfway measure that doesn't feel great. But maybe it's a little bit nicer than just outright banning it. I think most people are not in favor of banning the Terra Blast. Anyway. That's enough about that. What do you guys think about Terastallize? Do you still like it? Are you annoyed about Annihilate and other things? Or are you alright with Annihilate and stuff? Are you topping the ladder with no issue? You guys are rank 1 in OU. And you have not once been annoyed by the Terastallize mechanic. If that's you, please let me know down below. If you are rank 1 OU, and you have never had one you correctly predict every time they Terastallize, Or as soon as they Terastallize, you're fine with it because they just spent their resource. Now you can Terastallize electric and totally own anything. Totally freely. I know that no one asked, but I think that also we might have to like restrict boots because nothing in the game has knockoff anymore and boots are getting annoying. But no one asked me, so that's okay. I don't have any authority, so don't even worry about that, folks. Boots fans, you're in luck because nothing's gonna happen. Nothing's gonna happen to Boots probably. You're all in luck, Boots fans. Boots enjoyers, you can sleep easy because Boots are probably here to stay. That's just my thoughts. That's just what I would like, but I'm just one idiot. What do I want? What do I know? Okay. See you later, folks. Goodbye.